Hello everyone. In today's tutorial we are going to unwrap this pop can, create a couple texture maps for it, bring those texture maps back into Maya, and render out a nice still image render of this pop can using Arnold lights and materials. So yeah, first thing we gotta do is unwrap the can. So we need to open the UV editor. So if you are in your modeling toolkit, modeling menu set, you can go to UV editor, and it brings up our UV space. So I'm going to select this pop can and unwrap it. So right now, the pop can, it looks like it just has a basic planar projection. So we have UVs, but they are not functional at all. So let's unwrap this to make it a little bit easier to texture in Photoshop. If we look at this folder here, I do have some reference of like this Coca-Cola can. So I am going to take some creative liberty later on, but I want the overall idea. So I can see like here to here is that red Coca-Cola label, and then everything underneath it and above it is metal. So that can actually be a huge asset in helping me inform where I'm going to cut these seams. So obviously there's already kind of this seam between the red metal and the more standard chrome, not chrome, gray metal between the label area and the top and bottom of the can. So I'm going to use that kind of natural transition for my reference, and I'm going to create seams based on that. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the label area off. So I want to make that island. So let's go to edge mode, and it doesn't really matter where. I think this one will be good enough. Or yeah, let's do this one. I'll select that, and then in my UV toolkit, I'll go to cut and sew. I'll just cut that. So now we look at what's going on into the UV space. I have the top broken off and bottom. So now what I need to do is cut the bottom off. Let's go to edge mode, and looking at the reference, it's like right there. So I think if we go ahead and cut it right here, that should be fine. So let's do cut. Now we should have 3 UV islands for this pop can. Couple things. This one, because it's like a metal, we want this surface to be flat because we're actually going to put some textures on here. This is kind of a reference slash image I'm going to use. So you can see here we have this text right here that's kind of around the can. So we're going to want to make sure that's nicely flat for us. Everything else is going to be like this brushed metal. Okay, so let's take this and let's go to create automatic. So that didn't work for us. It cut up too many seams for us. So if we go to unfold, you can see it kind of splays it out nice and flat for us. So I think this can work for us. If we want it to, we might be able to like put a seam here, like break this rim off. But I think for our purposes, this is going to be okay. So let's look at the bottom. What happens if we do the same to the bottom? Unfold. That's not too bad either. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep. So now this is going to be the tricky part. So we're going to have a seam, and I want to put the seam in the back of the can. So it's going to be hidden from our camera. And in Photoshop, we can do a little bit of techniques to kind of cover up this seam, but it's not going to be too detrimental because it's going to be at the back of the can. So once we have this edge selected, we can hit cut. And let's go ahead and let's see what cylindrical projection does. That actually is exactly what we want. Does a really good job. So I think it's a little bit wobbly here. So maybe we can select it all and just straighten UVs. It takes a second. I got a lot of polygons. So we just kind of straighten some of those lines out a bit better. So yeah, super easy unwrapping this pop can. Something I do want you guys to notice is it was easy to do this because I didn't have like an interior to my can. Sometimes like there will be an interior. So if that was the case, I'd probably come right here, manually cut this seam here to break it off from like the faces on the inside um, to help unwrap that. But this can is really simple, really easy to work with. So once we have that, now we got to make sure the textile density is the same in relation to each other. So let's select all three islands, go to transform, scroll down till you see textile density, and we can just set it to 50. Doesn't matter what number, for our purposes, it doesn't matter what number it's on. It's going to shape them to be the same size. So, once we have this, let's go ahead and start fitting this into our UV tile. So select everything, select all three islands, go scroll down till you see arrange and layout, and we will hit layout. It does a really nice job of packing this on there. So we do have some space here, but we're actually going to need to put our UVs with this these two objects in here as well. And it's super easy to do that. What you do is you like select all those objects, and then we can render out the UV template with all three objects. But first, let's unwrap these pieces. So this piece is a little bit tricky, and isolate that. To isolate that short icon is right here. I have it set up for a shortcut. So anytime you see me do that, just come up to isolate selected, toggle it, and that's how you can select an object and only show that object. Alright, so let's go to edge mode. So this is actually going to be pretty easy to unwrap because that unfold button is super powerful. But what we are going to need to do first is kind of separate the top from the bottom. So I'm going to select the seam here, here, and here. And since the geometry is really nice, I should be able to just like double click, right? Shift double click, shift double click, and it should make a perfect edge loop going around these holes. So if we hit cut, let's clap some of these. Cut. We should have two, halves. So let's select the top half and let's hit, I don't know if I showed you guys this last video, but if we look at the top view and hit camera based, it unwraps it based on that camera, so sometimes that can be helpful, but I think unfold, nope, that kind of messes up, so maybe that is our best option. So let's go to our top orthographic view, so it's perfectly straight up and down, and let's just hit camera based. Okay, let's do the same since we're in this view for the bottom of that tab that we cut out. So let's go to camera based, and a couple things we can see if we turn on the checker pattern. The squares are a little bit stretched out, so we could manually scale this. Let's turn that off. We could manually scale it till it's more the size, but I think let's try one thing. I'm going to try to unfold. Nope, it still jacks it up. So Control Z. Let's try optimize. Oof. It's kind of working, but it's still rough right here because now we have overlapping UVs. So as long as this edge isn't overlapping, which it's not, I think we're gonna just scale it. So I'm going to turn on my UV checkerboard, look at my 3D view, select both UV islands, go to my scale tool, so hit R, and scale them up until the squares look like squares. I think that's pretty darn close. So once I got that, let's turn it off. Let's make sure this little dude is unwrapped, the button, or the pen. So select it. I think this one's super simple, so we should be able to just unfold. And yeah, that looks good. Control C. So yeah, there's no bottom to it, so yeah, unfold worked perfectly. Alright, so now let's select everything, because now we gotta make sure it's all organized, and they all fit. So obviously these tabs are way too big, that pin is probably too small. So let's select everything, and let's just go to our transform tab, texel density, and just set it. Once we do that, since we're here, we can scroll down to arrange and layout. Not too bad. I'm going to space these out just a little bit to give me some more room. And this Popkin is more like high resolution. It's not quite like commercial production quality, but it is a bit higher res um for a pop can. So this was probably pretty high res for a game model, unless like you're playing as an ant that's crawling on this surface or something. If this was like a prop that the character picks up, this is going to be way too many polygons for that. So um so we're not too worried about like this kind of empty space right now. Again, we're just practicing unwrapping and getting some textures on here. So yeah, I think this is good. I'm not going to leave space right here. That's fine. Let's check our checker patterns. And move this up a little. Scale it in just a smidge. Actually, we're going to keep that at the edges. So the checker pattern, it looks pretty consistent. So these do look a bit bigger than the ones on the side, but I'm not seeing anything crazy like that much of a difference, right? So that's going to be an issue, but I think we have right now is okay. And if we really needed this to be better laid out, we could have cut the top off with like the rim, but again, it's just going to be this generic metal, so I'm not too concerned with how those UVs are looking at the metal parts. Most important is going to be these ones, because that's where the label's going to go. Alright, so once we have this, we can go ahead. Just make sure you select all the objects on an object level. So right click object mode and then select them. And then we'll capture this UV template. So I'm going to go to that icon right there, UV snapshot options, and we're going to save this as Popcan UV template. save it as PNG. We will do 1K resolution now. Maybe you want to bump it up to 2K, but I think we'll be okay with 1K for now. So once you hit apply, see it says save file at the bottom. So now you can keep Maya open. Oh, this would be a really good place to save, right? So let's file, save scene as, save it on the desktop as popcan, maybe unwrap, and save. Alright, so in Photoshop, we'll just take that UV template we created, drag it into Photoshop, and then below this, let's name this layer UV temp. Let's actually just go ahead and lock it so we don't accidentally move. Let's create a new layer, move it underneath, and you can use either black or red. I actually like, or black or white. I like using black. It's easier on my eyes. So now we can see the wireframe a bit better and where we can line stuff up. Probably something that I want it to do, and I'll do it and just kick it out again, is select this one and rotate it like so. So we can easily put that text on there. So once we have this, just resave it out. Yep, overwrite. Oh, it's not going to let me overwrite because I need to object level, select them, snapshot. There we go. Alright, so back in Photoshop. Now unlock that, delete it, drag in a new one. There we go. That's just going to make my life a little bit simpler. Okay. So I have my reference on my other monitor, just to kind of see what's going on. And I do have some raw assets that I'm going to bring over to kind of combine to get my texture. So right now what we're going to be making is basically the diffuse texture. But when we bring it into Arnold, we're actually going to plug it into the specular slot because because for metals, the color actually comes from the reflectivity, not the diffuse. The diffuse is going to be black for metal objects. So cans are aluminum, they're metals, and you'll see this when we get in the material. But so when I name it, I'm going to name it reflection, even though it's going to look like the diffuse. So it's a little bit tricky when you're dealing with metals. Let's go ahead and bring my raw assets over. So I got this cool Coca-Cola. Scale it down. Just keep it there for now. I have this nutritional facts. I'm pretty sure I just nabbed off a Pepsi or a Coke bottle. And we'll deal with these ones first, build the label, and then we'll bring more in for the other parts. Okay, we'll commit to that. So I'm going to hide the label, and let's work on the new Coca-Cola. So I think Coca-Cola, if I remember correctly, did download like their label. This is how theirs is laid out, but I might do mine a little bit different. Okay. So I know this is going to be the front of the can right here, because this seam and this seam are that middle edge on the back that we broke. So if we want, we can actually just test this. We can go to File, Save As, Test. And this is the annoying part of texturing in Photoshop. It's just because it's like a different software and it's disconnected from that 3D space. Now I do believe they have implemented some 3D, you can model or texture on your 3D model in Photoshop. I haven't looked into it that much, so that's something that you might want to look into. So we want to save this as, let's just do popcan test, just so we can make sure. So right now we have this blend material. Let's double click it, drag this in, and plug the out color. This is the camera material, it's not our blend material. So we need to get this, we can right click node graph. Drag it in. And now we'll connect this out color to the color. And to see that on our object, this icon right here. So you can see we're getting that label. I think it might be cool to like replicate the Pepsi one. The issue with that is like this is the back of the can, so we'd have to cut this in half. We might do it. It'd be cool. But honestly, I think for our purposes that positioning and stuff is okay. Let's go back to Photoshop. I'm gonna Control T. We're gonna keep it simple, I think. We're not gonna do the double logo. So I'm gonna drag this underneath my template. And what we wanna do is make sure spilling the red over a little bit over that line. Okay. And let's unhide our nutritional logo. If this is too intense, you can always unlock the layer and drop the intensity a smidgen. And then just remember to lock it for the wireframe layer. Okay, so now with this, we can use probably our magic wand tool and select it, and let's just create a mask. So when you select outside, create a mask, like keeps what you have selected, but we can simply select the mask and Control I, and that inverts the mask. So I am going to cheese this a little bit. Just move it so the nutrition facts doesn't have to go off to the other side. Or should we put on the other side since that's what we're going to see? Yeah, nah. There's not enough room. So we'll just keep it there. So now we have to, I can hide the wireframe. Because now we have to kind of get this to blend to the left and to the right. So we could try to sample this color. Yeah. Make a new layer. So I'll organize these after I do this. But you see how it's not perfect because there's some shift in hue. Or, well, it's probably a value and value shift. Let's make a new layer. And here, sample this color and Control D to deselect. So what we can do is we can start blending this over to this side. You can use hand painted techniques. I don't have my tablet plugged in, so I can't get the pressure sensitivity. But let's see if we can sample that color. Let's get a brush. So maybe on a new layer on top of all of these. Oops, Control D, I had to select. Just trying to blend it a little bit. And really what I want to do is like patch an area, I think. So we can use like a ellipse selection. We kind of copy this from the reference image and paste it. And you can blend it that way. The easiest way I think to do this though, let's delete this layer real quick, is merge these. Let's merge. All I did was shift select all the layers, right click and merge. Before I do that, let me undo. So it look like this should go. There we go. So now shift select, right click merge. So now if it's one image, we can use like the spot healing tool. So if we grab like this line right here, we can start using spot healing. This can be one way to kind of start when try spot healing brush. That's so rough. So yeah, you would just go in there and try to blend this. I'll do try. Paste. Let me try this. Oh yeah, that's actually not too. So yeah, you just work on blending that a bit more using compositing or copying like information from here and just blending it. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time doing that. I do kind of want to at least get a little bit better. Probably. It's because I'm on a new layer. And I'm going to like try to cut this. I know I'm gonna like get really close to this edge and I want it to be crisp, so I'm gonna edit, copy, edit, paste special, paste in place. And so I can like do some blending stuff on this layer underneath, but I still have that hard edge right there. So I should have captured, but that's okay. Hopefully you guys can see how I'm kind of going about blending it. So you want to do that here too. Maybe the nutritional facts, just keep it like this harsh color. And if you want to hide that seam, so this is like a solid red right here, and I think that might be okay. So something we can do is bring that solid red on the other side of the seam, ever so slightly, just a little sliver. Fill it. And then what you would do, oh, smudged. So you can use the blur tool and smudge tool. So I think, let me step back. We're going to make this actually bigger. And you can blur it using the blur tool. So we know that color is going to blend in nicely to our other one. And then we can just work on like sampling pixels here. Oops, maybe not there. Here. Blur tool. Or we can try smudge. Right, so you just want to blend that color in. And this one's a little bit trickier because it does have like a lot of texture to it. So that's pretty annoying. And then I can already see, like, when I zoom out, like, I can kind of see it's really patchy. So if this was like for a project, I would definitely go in, spend a lot more time with my sampling, and then just slowly transitioning to this darker value. Even like here, we can maybe make a new layer on top. Right? And then just try to like match the red more using like compositing for that spot. So I don't want to waste too much time doing that kind of stuff. But hopefully you guys can see the tools I was using, like the patch tool. I use a little bit of spot healing, not too much though. It's not really working on here. And I use blur and smudge, and that was kind of helpful. And sometimes I'll just like duplicate information from here onto a new layer and try to work with it that way. Alright, so let's look at the metal parts. So the metal's going to be pretty easy, I think. So I'm not going to worry too much about the direction of this brushed metal, but I have this kind of cool brushed metal texture. And let's duplicate it. Okay. Let's duplicate Okay, one more time. Okay. So now I'm going to do layer masks for these. And I'll get a black brush. Just make sure. Get a hard brush, actually. So now you can see it's harder to see the wireframe, but that's okay. We just want to make sure we can go back to this layer to a white brush and bring that little bit back. Or even smarter way, we hide this layer. Let's delete the layer mask. Hide this layer. Do magic wand selection. Oops. Check sample all layers. There we go. And then we go to turn this layer back on. We create a layer mask. Control I. And gotta be careful though, because some of these pixels that we deleted were inside of that UV map. So you might want to go in, brush, and just kind of trace around it to make sure it's encompassing. And it doesn't have to be perfect. What does have to be perfect is that this information is inside the UV island. Let's do the same thing for this one. I'll probably actually do it for those ones too. So hide this layer. The selection with the magic wand tool, sample all layers. Oof. Okay, that one's not as friendly. So let's just grab circle. And we will create a layer mask. And I can see it's poking out a little bit. Let's select this layer. I think that should be good. Probably a bit closer than I would like. I should have made that marquee selection a bit bigger. Right. So now we got that metal on there. Let's hide the wireframe and let's start organizing this scene. It's starting to get a bit ruly. Alright, so we got nutrition facts. Let's bring this down. So what we can do, so let's make a group. Call this one label. And we'll make another group with these. Oops, put one. This one is part of the label. And we'll call this one metal. Okay, so I am going to just cut circle out from here. Make sure I'm on that layer. Go to edit, copy, edit, paste, and put that over there because that little guy is metal too. So hide this. So I overall think this brush is too strong. So what I'm gonna do, this brushed aluminum is way too strong. Like looking at my reference, I want to be really subtle with it. So now I'll make a new layer. I'll create a, not pure black, but a pretty dark gray on top. And fill. So yeah, if I go to my fill tool and I check sample all layers, it's going to look at all layers, even though I'm putting it on a new one. So I can just select where it's the metal is. And then we could play with the minting modes, but I think we can just drop the opacity a bit. Because I just want that to be really subtle. Especially because the unwrap is kind of weird along the edges. So yeah, we'll just cover it up a little bit. So once I get that, this is too dark. So what I'll do is I'll go to my adjustments. I will add a, I don't want curves. I think just brightness contrast one will be good. And then we'll set it so right now if we start messing with it, it messes. With our whole scene. So if you only want it to affect the metal, which we do, make sure it's above that metal. Actually, what we have to do is we have to first merge these metals. So let's go ahead and merge layers. Or we could create a smart layer, but this is fine. Hold the Alt and click, and that will create a clipping mask, so it's only affecting the layer that's directly underneath it. So now we can play with the brightness, and we'll brighten this value up quite a bit. Okay. Alright, so we kind of got our metal. One more thing I want to do is add this information, right? So to do that, let's drag that asset in. I am going to straight cut this out. And we don't need this other information, so I'll just delete that. And turn my wireframe back on. So I'm going to hide the metal that we painted so I can see the wireframe easier. And it's, I think the wireframe rendered out gray. Oops. Delete. I was accidentally moving my a layer that was hidden, so might be a good idea to start locking stuff just so we don't. Okay. So I'll copy, paste. Should be able to do this one. Alright, so this one's tricky because we know like some of these edges are actually the rim of our pop can, but basically this edge right here, we just follow this around, this is going to be equivalent to this. So we're going to scale this down, so Control T, hold Shift, and oops, I'm actually upside down, so I'll rotate it, hold Shift and we'll rotate to 90. I want it to fit right here. I think that's actually really going to be nice. It's going to fit on that flat surface of our pop can. maybe bring it back a little bit. But you can see how it's following the curve of our topology pretty darn nicely. So let's hide the wireframe. Obviously we have a lot of information here that we don't need. So what I'm going to do is create a layer mask. And I will brush tool, layer mask. So start painting black values to hide. I know I'm in my, okay. I have my layer selected. Make sure you have your layer mask selected. There we go. Rid of this information. So really, again, this is probably good for like a lower res model doing this, but this is a higher res model. So really, in all actuality, what I would do is if this was a project, I'd go into Illustrator to recreate this, because you can see how pixelated it looks right now. So I'd really go into Illustrator and create this text in Illustrator. That way I have it's sharper and I can change the size without worrying about loss of resolution. So yeah, I would take that into Illustrator and then bring it back into Photoshop and comp it on. So, okay, so obviously we need to match the grays. Let's see if we can use a blending mode. So I'm just cycling through the blending modes using my arrow keys. Oops, this got hidden too. Turn that on. There should be one. There we go. So overlay, and it's super faint. So what we might want to do is go to adjustments, add a curves adjustment, hold Alt, create a clipping mask so it's only affecting this layer. What we'll do is we'll kind of want to keep lights light. We want to bring out that dark more. There we go. So I'm really experimenting with my curve. I just added 2 points. And I was playing with it till I make it so that middle gray value is enough that the overlay blending mode will blend it perfectly. So that's not, it's super subtle, and we might not even notice it in the render. And again, that's why I would just take this into Illustrator, trace it, or create the text in Illustrator, so we can like make it a little bit thicker and stuff like that. So again, this is like the really cheesy way to put that on there, but it's gonna work for our purposes. So once we have that, let's go ahead and organize, because I am not organized in Photoshop right now. So we can call this group, we could probably, yeah, let's just put this in a new group. Call this one like metal text. I think that should be good. And we'll put all 3 of these in a new group and call this one reflection. So we have one texture done. So from this reflection map, we can actually derive our bump map, and then we can convert a bump map into a normal map in Photoshop. But we need to change it to a grayscale black to white information, and then we can start extracting things. So if you remember, a bump map, if anything is white, when we plug the bump map texture in, white values raise above the surface or give the illusion that they're raising above the surface, and black values give the illusion like they're sinking into the surface. So I don't think we want necessarily everything in here to come up. So like this nutrition facts, we really don't want this to bump up. But Nuka-Cola, maybe this text information here, and I don't think this text information we want to bump because it's not very important. So maybe we want this to bump up, this to bump up, and this to kind of sink in, look like it was punched in the metal, this text right here. So I think that's what we're going to do. So let's duplicate this whole reflections layer. And let's call this one bump. And let's start with the label. Oops. I think I Control Z. So let's lock this reflection one. And again, it looks like a diffuse, and normally it would be a diffuse, but since we're putting it on a metal, it's going to be the reflection map. Because metals receive their color from the reflections pass. Alright, so let's hide that one. So bump, let's look at the label. So the first thing I'm going to do, I think, is let's select all the label stuff. Okay? And let's merge. Yeah, let's merge it. So for a bump map, if you don't want to give the illusion of the height, you need 50% gray. So I'm going to come in here and set the brightness to 50%. And this is going to be my base flat color. So let's make a new one. I'm just going to scribble it in a new layer. Am I like selected somewhere? Oh, I locked it. Okay. So I'll just put that right here. So everything that doesn't bump up, everything that we don't want to think bumping up and going down or sinking in, we want to make this gray color. So let's do that. Honestly, I could just fill. Oops. I made this new layer, layer 7. I could just uncheck. I'm going to my fill bucket, and I'm going to uncheck all layers, and I'm just going to fill everything in this gray. Okay. So this layer's on top. That's fine. We'll get to that in a second. But I'll hide it for a second. What we want to do is get this Nuka-Cola logo in this text here. So how can we do that? I think we could use our magic wand tool, and it actually does a pretty good job because it's such a sharp contrast. But getting this is going to be tricky. Yeah. So let's grab this Nuka-Cola first. So I'll go to Edit, Copy Merged, and then in a new layer above this gray layer, or yeah, new layer above the gray layer with that selection. You don't even have to paste it. We can really just fill it in white. Control D. So this is going to be a pretty rough transition. It's going to transition fast. So if we want to soften it, we can do things like if you right click this Nuka-Cola layer that we created, go to blending options. If we add like a outer glow, maybe outer glow, select it, and do make a light gray, and we will take the size in a little bit. So we're just trying to blur the edges a little bit so it's not such like a straight sharp transition. I think we actually want to make it white. And drop the okay. So it should give us a softer transition into that bevel up. So this is going to look really crazy if we keep it like this light of a value. We don't want the bump to appear like it's raising out a lot. We just want it like a subtle bump. So what we're going to do is drop the opacity down. We still want to make sure that white is over the 50 mark. So we'll do like, actually no, it doesn't matter because it's always going to be lighter than that gray. So we can actually take it down far, but let's try something like 36. Okay. So once we have that, and then the same concept, if you want to bring something else out, you just need to capture that information and make it white and then opacity. So let's go to the metal texture. And the metal we can just hide because we want all that to be gray information too for our bump map. But it's this that we want to sync in. And because of how we cut it in, or we comped it on top, we didn't flatten it, we can just go to this curves layer and tweak it so that that kind of background color that's on the text kind of fades in. And since this is already black, it's already going to appear like it's cutting in. I'll keep that one pretty strong. So this is our bump map. So everything that's gray is going to be flat. It's not going to appear, there's going to be no illusion of height or depth. But the lighter values will appear to bump off of the surface, and the darker values are going to appear to sink into the surface. So we can go ahead and keep this. So one last thing we want to do is create the normal map. So let's drag this right here, name this one normal. And what we're going to need to do is everything in the normal, we can delete. Just keep it off. Right, our shift click, right click, merge layers. So what we do is we just have the bump map. So in Photoshop, we have this cool technique that will create a normal map from this bump map. And a normal map is like a bump map. It's a bit better because, but instead of like using the grayscale information, it uses like this. It uses the red, green, and blue channel in an image to kind of fake out the normals of our lighting. So it will fake the direction of the normals of our topology, our geometry. So it's like a more advanced bump map is how you can think of it. And we will definitely be using normals a lot later on in the semester. But for now, we're just going to cheese it and make them in Photoshop. So if I hit the filter tab, go to 3D, make sure you're on this, and let's actually call this one normal. So what we'll do is we'll go to filter, 3D, generate normal map. And what you'll see is, oh, and you can see how bad this is. Again, take it into Illustrator, make that text nice. So that's a hot mess. Okay, but you see how the Nuka-Cola turned out nice. That's because that was a high enough resolution image. So this actually looks good. So let's hit invert because right now it appears to be, it's always hard for me to tell, but that looks like it's faking sinking in, and this looks like it's faking bumping out. So let's just invert this. Yeah, now that looks like it's carving in, this looks like it's sinking out. So I think Photoshop might invert white is gonna sink in, black is gonna dip out. But any other 3D software package, it's the opposite. Okay, so once we have this, let's hit OK. And we have our normal map. Ooh, why did it do this though? Control Z. I'm going to make sure stuff gets cropped outside. It's crop, delete, crop. Okay, so select this 3D or filter 3D, right? Normal map. This is not there right here, so it's kind of weird. Okay, there we go. So I must have had some pixels off the screen that got generated somehow. Alright, so this is our normal. So now what we need to do is go out and actually save these. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. This is going to be our normal map. So I'll call this one probably like PopCan Normal. For Arnold, we're not going to plug this into the bump map, but we could if we wanted to. So I'm going to skip this one, but I want to grab this reflection. So File, Save As, PopCan Reflection. And we can save them as Photoshop files, and that's fine. Really, I would probably, since we have more maps in here, I'd save a master Photoshop file and then just save them out as like PNGs or JPEGs or something. Notice, again, just make sure you hide this wireframe so you don't see it on your texture. Alright, so let's jump back into Maya. So, a couple things. I do have a scene set up in here, so we don't have to spend too much time in this video going over that. If you go to the channel box, you can hit V in the lights, camera, and backdrop. And I have this simple studio kind of set up for the can. So if we hit IPR, we can see what's going to happen. And remember, to get into the camera, you go to Panels, Perspective, Cam 1, and this is the view of the camera. So I think something to make it a little bit more interesting would be to rotate the can a bit. Then you can't see the cola. Something like that. I think that's a little bit more interesting. Okay. Let's create a material. So we're using Arnold Lights, Arnold Render Engine, so obviously we want to use Arnold materials. This icon, wait, which one? One of these clears. But I think it deletes the material, so don't do that. Okay. Well, thought there was a way to just clear it, but it looked like it deleted it. I undid that. So let's go to Arnold, shader, and grab the AI standard surface. So what we're gonna do is add stuff. So this is the long way to do it. So we're gonna put something in the specular color. So specular is reflectivity in Arnold, essentially. So we want to change it from white to the map that we created. Let's set this from hardware to Arnold so we can see what it's doing, what it's going to look like closer to our render. If we want, well, sphere balls. All right, another thing we can do is we can like drag. That means shrink Maya. Another thing we can do is just like navigate to our files, and we'll grab the PopCan reflection, and you can drag it in, and it will create the file node with that file already linked to it, and we can plug it into the node that we need to. Or we can go into Arnold, scroll down. So the specular color is what we want to plug the reflection map into. So we can click this, go to File, and then navigate to the file that way too. So two different ways to do the same thing. But since I dragged this in, I can just take the out color and plug it into the spec color. So notice how we don't see anything. And I was telling you, oh, it will get the color from the metal. Well, this isn't a metal material yet, and that's why we don't see any change when we plug the reflection map into the spec color. So the first thing we need to do is in the Arnold material, so just double click here, you want to crank this metalness value all the way to 1 because it's an aluminum pop can, it is a metal. And then you want to take the color all the way down to black. Now this should... Oh, because it doesn't have the UV, so it's probably an empty space. So let's go ahead and I just want to make sure this map is applied. There it is. No. It's because I clicked this. So select this object, hold. Yeah, we should be seeing the metal. Come on. Assign material to select. Did I just not save it out correctly? So let's save this out as a JPEG. And I'm going to delete that. So in here, oh wait, if this doesn't work, I know why it's not showing up. I forgot one more thing. Double click here, file, navigate to the reflection. Okay, so we made it a metal, right? In Arnold, what we have to do is we actually have to increase this IOR value. But why is it grayed out? Oh, geez, that's not cool. We need to crank this IOR value to like 22 because this is a real world setting. Yeah, I don't know why it's grayed out in this one, so we're just gonna make a new material. Maybe we want to set the metal up first. So, sorry about that, guys. So let's set the metalness to 1. Take the color to black. All the colors should be derived from the reflections in most metals. We'll take the roughness. We'll keep the roughness down. Oh wait, can it not be? What did I change? Oh, is the metalness supposed to be at 0? Let's 22. Oh, so 0 is black. 1. No. It should be this, but it keeps graying this out. That's weird. Well, either way, they both look pretty metallic, so I think we do want the metalness to be at 0. Doesn't make too much sense, because black should be non-metallic and white should be metallic. But maybe I'm mixing up my software packages. Okay, so we got that. Color should be black. So you see we're getting this chrome look. IOR should be at 22. This is a real world value, and metals have a high IOR of 22 on upward, depending on the metal. So now what we can do is let's bring in that image. So this is still that same image, so I'm just gonna select the arrow and break it. Let's move it over here. Let's call this one Popcan. Matte Popcan. So let's take the out color and plug it into the specular color. There we go. That's what I want to see. So you can see that's pretty metallic. Now, if I'm looking at my reference, which I always have on my other monitor, this one actually looks like plasticky. It doesn't even look metallic. The red looks plastic and the metallic is like there. But I really like this can. So this is like this metallic sheen on it. So what I'm going to do is, and you can see it's like the reflections are blurred. So what I need to do is take the roughness and I need to bring it up a little bit, and that's going to start blurring the reflections. So if I look at my metal part, you can see how the light is kind of getting blurred. So let's not take it up too high. Maybe let's try 1.6 or 0.16, and then we will see what that's looking like in our IPR render. So I'll hit IPR. Oh, so awesome. Oh, it's because I didn't assign this material. GG. Okay, so we can actually select the pop can, hold shift, select the tab, and select the pin, and assign this same material to all three objects. See, I feel like that metal is not supposed to be at... I'm going to try this. It is at 1. Oh wait, that's the wrong material. At pop can, take this metalness to 1, and it just goes away. Okay, let's keep it at 0. So if you think the reflections are still a bit too sharp, and blur them by increasing the roughness. And the more you introduce roughness into your surface, the longer renders are going to take. But I think I'm getting a way better result.
Hey, so I had to stop the video. I had to go take care of something real quick, and I'm bringing it back up now. So I did end up wanting to go back though, because I think I made a mistake in my normal map. When I assigned it right after I just did that hard transition, it was looking funny. So I'm gonna come back into Photoshop and tweak that. So yeah, I just duplicated my bump map layer again, duplicated it and merged it down to get this, and then I'll call this normal. Also, I changed the mic I was using. I was accidentally using my headset mic, and I meant to use my recording mic. Anyway, so if I sound different, that's why. So yeah, let's create the normal map. So I'll go to Filter, 3D, Generate Normal Map. So I didn't play with any of these settings, and had I rotated around, I would have noticed that's pretty soft and large. So we can actually play with the contrast and detail. So what I'm going to do is play with these values. So that's way too blurry. There we go. So you can see how like soft it is, like how soft that edge. So I'm going to bring this value down and try to sharpen it just a little. Bring the high down. I wish you could zoom in. But yeah, I think that's what we want. Because when I did the test, it was looking too soft and doughy. So we could have adjusted the bump map, but you can actually make adjustments in the normal, generate normal map. So I'll hit OK. And it will generate my normal map for me. There it is. So yeah, again, this is just so bad. Okay, so once we have that, let's go ahead and file. Let's save as, let's just save it as our normal. Okay. So in Maya, our material editor, let's turn IPR on. Let's plug in that normal. So I'm going to go to my material and geometry tab, bump mapping, and I'll hit this icon right here. We'll plug in a file, but it kind of kicks us out to this node right here, bump to D1. So we should change this use as a bump. We want to use it as a tangent space normal. Okay. So you can see it's thinking. And if I click on the file node, we actually have to plug in the file still. So click that icon, navigate to the normal, and you can see we're starting to see that normal detail. It's starting to fake the height information. Now, it's also doing this weird faceting thing, and it has to do with the color space. So you can see we're in sRGB. For some reason, coming from Photoshop to Arnold does this, but I find if you set it to Scene Linear Recreation 709 sRGB, that corrects the issue. So you can see it's faking this height detail, and we're not getting that artifacting going on. So yeah, that's it. So let's go back to our camera view because I think I might be in perspective, panels, cam. And we'll reset the IPR. There we go. So yeah, you can see that it's faking the height detail at the top too. So yeah, that's all that you really need to do to get a simple, nice looking can. So yeah, just make sure, I didn't demonstrate it here, but when you guys turn in your homework assignment, you're gonna wanna make sure you have a file that has your raw assets. So you just name this folder raw assets, and they would go there. So I already have one on my desktop. And you'd also want one called texture maps, because when I go to open your guys' Maya files, I'm going to have to tell Maya to look in this folder for these maps. So the two maps that you plug in to here, go ahead and put them in that texture maps folder, and then just put this folder in the overall zip. But that is all I have for you today. So I will see you all later. Have a good one.